Hello, everyone. Welcome to this panel organized by the Green Group in the European Parliament. In this 1 hour, we will be discussing the 10 year after the Istanbul Convention, especially considering the unfortunate events that about Turkey's withdrawal, and also the European Directive on Gender-Based Violence. My name is Özge Can Kara. I am the Secretary General of Federation of Young European Greens, and I will be moderating this discussion. And I'm joined by 3 amazing panelists, which I will introduce and give word to them very shortly. But before we start, maybe a few housekeeping rules. Please share this event on social media with hashtag #NoMoreEmptyWords, and feel free to tag the Green Group in the European Parliament. And we will have some time for the audience to ask questions to our panelists. So I don't want to talk too much, and let me introduce our first keynote speaker, Alice Bah Kuhnke. She is a Swedish member of the European Parliament. She is the Vice President of the Green Group in the European Parliament, and she is the coordinator of the Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality.
Thank you. Thank you, Özge, and thank you for moderating this event. And to the participants, I am so honored to have you with us here today. You are the true experts on this topic, and I will carefully listen to your insights. Gender-based violence is a serious crime that affects 1 in 3 women in the EU. It's one of the most systematic and widespread forms of human rights violations. The Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, also known as the Istanbul Convention, celebrates, as we all know, 10 years this year. The Convention is the most far-reaching international legal instrument to protect women in all their diversity from gender-based violence. It has been a successful instrument in guiding countries in the work to prevent and combat gender-based violence. Yet, the Convention is challenged by regressive forces across Europe, as we are currently witnessing a serious backlash against gender equality and women's rights. After 10 years, all member states have not ratified the Istanbul Convention. Some countries that have ratified are now threatening to withdraw from the convention. This is unacceptable in a union based on the principle of equality. And then, a few weeks ago, President Erdogan declared that Turkey would leave the treaty. This will leave millions of victims without any protection and infringe on the human right to live free from violence. This is where we find ourselves today, in a moment of despair and frustration. I am, and many with me, are afraid that Turkey's withdrawal will create a domino effect, and that regressive leaders will follow President Erdogan's example. But we cannot rest until we have eradicated gender-based violence. And that is why I am so happy to have you all here today, to dissect the situation in Turkey and highlight ways forward to stop this extreme form of misogyny. Having said this, I very much look forward to hear you sharing your perspectives on what is happening in Turkey, reactions from Turkish feminist activists, and what the EU can do to help our allies in Turkey and put pressure on leaders such as Erdogan. As the Greens EFA group in the European Parliament are currently working on a campaign calling for an EU directive to prevent and combat gender-based violence, I am also interested in discussing possible ways forward and the EU's role in fighting gender-based violence. And my last addition, before I give back the floor to Özge, if you are interested in this campaign, our petition, future events and actions, I urge you to visit the Greens EFA webpage, where you can find all the information. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice, and thank you for inviting all of us and organizing this panel. Besides being the Secretary General of Federation of Young European Greens, I'm also a Turkish feminist, so I think it is absolutely important that we are discussing this all together with our partners in the European Parliament, as well with our allies in the European Parliament as well. So today we will look at this, both the Istanbul Convention and what is happening in Turkey, and also the gender-based violence directive from different aspects. And for this, we have two more speakers. We have Aslıhan Tekin from Turkey. She is the EU representative of European Women's Lobby Coordination for Turkey. And we have Kenan Russell. They are the Senior Policy Officer at ILGA, International Lesbian and Gay Alliance Europe. So welcome, everyone. First, let's maybe start with the situation in Turkey, which, I mean, when I say it like this, then the situation in Turkey, we can sit down and talk about hours and hours about this, but let's maybe channel it a little bit more and about the Istanbul Convention. So maybe Aslıhan, you can introduce us what is happening in Turkey in this last 3 months, let's say.
Thank you very much, Özgecan. I would like to thank, of course, Greens EFA for this meeting. It's very timely, and all of you for being here today. I'm looking forward to fruitful exchange of what we can do, what has been happening. So with your first question right now, what is happening in Turkey? I mean, in recent years, in both in Turkey actually, and also across the globe, campaigns aiming targeting and restricting, undermining human rights, gender equality, women and girls in particular, and LGBTI plus persons have been increasing. This is not only in the political area, but it's also in the streets, in the local levels too, in media too. So it is getting more visible. Such campaigns are rising and supporting the authoritarian system leaders, patriarchal systems that we are trying to change together. This means also undermining democracy and disrupting and narrowing what we understand from democracy. So understanding of family becomes the key here as a moral and economic dimension, and it is threatening gender equality, feminist and LGBTI plus discourses and our grounds. So coming back to Turkey directly, I mean, since in 2011, let's say in 2000, we have been seeing this shift in Turkey's discourse on human rights, gender equality. In 2011, we had a ministry responsible for women and family, and then its name changed and it became to family. So we lost women there, and the orientation on family discourse has become more visible. And then in 2013, Gezi Park protests happened. In 2016, we had the military coup attempt. All this came together, and finally, the Bosphorus protest, which happened recently, which started with the president appointed rector by the president, and then turned into LGBTI plus hate crime, severe campaign all over by the state authorities and on the visible public resources. So this came all together, and of course Istanbul Convention, withdrawal of the Istanbul Convention, and it is not staying there on targeting women and gender equality. We have been tackling for many years on the attacks on the elemental rights, how we implement right to abortion in Turkey. It is a right there since 1983, but it is not applied by the state, most of the state hospitals. So there has been attacks on women's rights and girls' rights in general, and including all the human rights areas. So freedom of expression, freedom of assembly are at stake here for many years now. And how we are tackling this on the ground is very, it creates democratic space shrinking for civil society, for women's organizations at first. For us, there is a recent legislation on the law on the prevention of proliferation of weapons and mass destruction, threatening the very existence of women's rights NGOs and civil society organizations, but supporting, also creating a space for government to support GONGOs. We call them governmentally backed NGOs. So they create their own NGOs and then they support them as if there's a communication between civil society and the government, but there is none. So that Turkey was the first country, as you know, signed the Istanbul Convention and ratified. We have been proud of this, but actually we have been tackling this for on the ground, the attacks on gender equality and women's rights for a long while. And the withdrawal decision coming on 20th of March during the UNCSW 65, the month of women's rights and gender equality. We have received this announcement, and since actually last summer, women's movement in Turkey in the bigger, spectrum have been tackling this news that we have been trying to prevent this, but we have been actually finally faced with this decision. So this decision actually for us, for women's movement, for civil society organizations, for many of us is an attack on women's rights and human rights, but not only women's rights. It's an attack on LGBTI plus community too. It's an attack for human rights. Existing mechanisms, already existing human rights system is attacked with this decision. And we are trying to create awareness on this, but also it is very important to hear this out, that this decision's legitimacy is also at stake. For us, it is null and void for civil society or for many stakeholders, because this decision is against many articles in the Constitution of Turkey. Name it Article 90 and Article 104, which actually states international conventions are domestic human rights conventions under the legislation, and also the president has no legitimacy on withdrawing from human rights conventions on behalf of the country. So therefore this decision is taken to the Council of State, which is the highest administrative court in Turkey, and many civil society organizations, bar associations have taken this decision to the court. On the other hand, this has also created space. I think we will have time to discuss this further, how we are trying to uphold the convention on the ground in the international level. Thank you very much, Özge.
Yes, indeed. Like when we say what is happening in Turkey, it takes it's a very, very big topic. An interesting thing that you mentioned there, the attack on family values, and I'm putting the quote marks here. And I think Kenan's input would be very valuable here, because obviously Turkey is not the only country. Well, Turkey is the first country to withdraw, but it's not the only country that has not ratified it. Hungary, I mean, is a very obvious example, but not only the UK, Latvia, and the EU has not ratified it, signed it, but not ratified it. So so Kenan, maybe you can talk a little bit about, like, how do you find this attack, saying that this is against our family values, and kind of shifting from ratifying the convention?
Yeah, indeed. Thanks very much. As was said, my name is Kenan Russell. I'm a senior policy officer at the International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Trans, and Intersex Association, which we're a regional network in Europe and Central Asia, focusing on LGBTI rights. So I have a couple of thoughts. The first of them is, I think it's really vital for us who are on the sort of pro-rights, pro-democracy side to continue to encourage ourselves to take a step back and look at the entirety of what's happening, not the individual attacks, because so many of these individual efforts are really intentionally designed to be a distraction or a misdirection from the larger systemic change that is trying to be promoted by efforts like what's happening in Turkey, but really around Europe generally. So when you ask about sort of attack based on the concept of family values, what I think is particularly interesting about this is that they don't actually mean family. They mean a very specific definition of family, and they only mean that definition of family when it aligns politically with the larger system that they're trying to promote. And it seems to me like many more people should be afraid of the leveraging of terms like family to actively exclude some families, because what we know about the way that authoritarian and anti-democratic efforts work is that they shave people off, and start by shaving off someone that's as far at the margins as possible, and then move in a little bit because whoever's left at the margins now can be shaved off. And before long, it's a certain set of specific families with a certain religion, a certain age, a certain income that are protected and no one else. And we should all be frightened by that, not just people who have already been or are being shaved off of the concept. I'd like to talk a little bit about the sort of looping back around to this instrumentalization that we're seeing happen in Turkey and in several EU member states of LGBTI people and the human rights of LGBTI people as a way to argue against the Istanbul Convention generally. Because I think what's really important to keep in mind here is that LGBTI people and the rights of LGBTI people are a smokescreen. Leaving an international treaty or refusing to join an international treaty is about authoritarianism, is about an anti-foreign policy, anti-diplomatic, anti-democratic approach to doing national policy and national government. And you can't look at isolationism on a topic by topic basis. Isolationism is isolationism, and isolationism means that it is inherently authoritarian and anti-democratic. And one of the conversations we have, both within feminist and LGBTI movements, is that our issues are just the canary in the coal mine, just the one that will fall first. But when they fall, all actors involved in social justice, involved in democracy, involved in human rights, involved in economic equality issues should be afraid, because the efforts by governments like Erdogan's, but also many others that are involved in this conversation are not about LGBTI people at all. They're about centralizing the money, centralizing the power, and using whatever levers are possible to get the general public to support that centralization. I'm going to connect myself to this really quickly, which is something I don't usually do in these conversations. But I'm from Kansas, right in the middle of the U.S., and there is a book that was published in the late 1990s called "What's the Matter with Kansas?" We're a relatively poor, underpopulated state. It's only about 2 million people, and the state is 3/4 the size of Germany, right? So very, very unpopulated, and always votes extremely conservative. And the US Conservative Party is the one that is about deregulation of business, about dismantling social support systems. Why do people do that? People do that because they believe that they can be the exception to the rule, that I am not the one that's going to be cut out of the prosperity, of the opportunity, that I am going to be protected because I share my faith, or I share my skin color, or I share my gender with the person in power, and so they will inherently protect me. And in the end, we end up undercutting ourselves in all of the ways that actually matter. We oppose systems that would support us, not because we don't want those systems to support us, but because ideologically we've been convinced that those systems are working against us. And so it's really essential when we talk about the Istanbul Convention and about the so-called backlash against women's and LGBTI rights in the region, that we start to really unpack what's involved in there, which is an attack on everyone's rights. It's just not you right now, not it's an attack on someone else.
Thank you so much. It is absolutely true that it is not just on you right now. And completely agree that unfortunately we first see it in the most marginalized groups, and then it will come towards the center. And personal, and thanks for involving yourself, maybe because personal is political, and I think it's quite personal for all of us in this panel, that this issue is very important, and probably for our audience as well. Before I pose my further questions, let me just remind once again that please leave any comments or questions in the YouTube or Facebook, wherever you are watching us, and we will try to pick them up in the Q&A section, or I will try to read and see, for example, that we are not only talking about Hungary or Turkey. Of course, that is exactly what is happening in Poland as well. So please share also your notes with us so we can share it with our panelists as well. Following up on this, an unfortunate thing happened in Turkey when this Istanbul Convention withdrawal was announced by Erdogan. That unfortunately some political parties or some groups kind of tried to put the LGBTI issue a little bit away, and they were saying like, no, but this is only for women and girls, and it's about domestic violence. Of course, thankfully, to the strong LGBTI community in Turkey, this message has been changing. But so maybe Aslan, can you let us know what is right now the main message from the feminist activists in Turkey?
Oops, thank you very much, Özgecan. As you have actually, and Kenan has actually also mentioned, the excuse given as the reasoning for the withdrawal decision was officially, it was stated, normalization of homosexuality. So this is unacceptable, and they were also actually undermining the impact on women's rights and girl child, and together with the LGBTI plus rights. So it is, what is the main message? We have been witnessing this emerging regime that attacks on women's rights and LGBTI plus rights and on human rights in general, as a consequence of this already existing patriarchal system, misogynist perspective, which is authoritarian regime. So this is there, but this also means they are scared of us. They are scared of women's movement, feminists, LGBTI plus. They are all independent NGOs. They know we are strong, and the most resilient opposition movements we are in the world, in the world, wherever we are protesting in, be it in Turkey, be it in Europe, globally, think it that way. They know we are determined with exuberance to institute equality and rights for all, and they know we can do it. This is how it starts and how it flames up, This is why they want to stop us, using all their financial and institutional resources. But we, as civil society organizations, movements from all around human rights, spectrum, we will move forward with perseverance. They may have the resources and political institutions and political power, but they must also know that our solidarity is invincible and incomparable. Let them be scared, and they know we are the ones to bring the change. We are the change that we are representing. So regression from the Istanbul Convention should be recognized, as Kenan has also mentioned, as a regression from commitments to equality, democracy, and the rule of law from the all human rights family. But as a good news, I would like to share with as feminists and LGBTI plus organizations from Turkey, Europe, and international networks, we have come together to launch an intersectional campaign titled United for Istanbul Convention against global anti-gender attacks and intensifying threats, that are happening to leading us to a backlash. And please follow us with the hashtag on United for Istanbul, IC. And international women's and LGBTI organizations will continue to join forces to safeguard our rights for all of us, and we will uphold the Istanbul Convention. We won't give up the Istanbul Convention, and it is ours because it saves our lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It is really good to hear this. I haven't been in Turkey for some time, but really the LGBTI movement and the feminist movement in Turkey, it is the strongest movement, and it gives so much hope to us in Brussels also, and I hope rest in Europe and EU. This being said, the EU still has some work to do, I guess. I think so. So maybe I will now address the shift a little bit to the European Union perspective, because do we think that the EU is doing enough on gender equality and combating gender-based violence? So first, maybe I give again the word to Kenan, and then we also get the European Parliament perspective from Alice, but start with Kenan.
If I may divert just a moment to reflect on something that Ashan said before moving to that question. I like framing this as they are scared of us, and I actually think it's important to take it all the way to the why. The why they are scared of us is because we present one manifestation of doing things differently, of being able to look at the prescribed life, the prescribed steps that we are all taught we must take. And LGBTI people and feminist movements specifically say maybe I don't want to take those steps. Maybe I want to take different ones, and that's okay. And I should be allowed to take them, protected, and have my right to investigate what the best direction for me in my life is, protected by the government that is responsible for protecting me. I think that is the scary thing, that we say you don't need to necessarily follow all rules. Maybe those rules are archaic. Maybe those rules were designed for a different type of moment or a different type of people to question them. And that's where we get back to issues about anti-democratic and anti-economic economic centralization efforts. Is they need us to follow instructions. They need us to do what they say is best for us. And the moment that we stop doing that, they start to lose that authoritarian grip. So I think that's a really great framing, Aslan. Thank you for that. On the EU and gender-based violence and gender equality, ILGA Europe very happily welcomed the gender equality strategy last year, and I'd like to reflect a moment on the use of the phrase in all their diversity that I've heard already in this call. That strategy is the clearest commitment that the European Union has made to asserting that when talking about women, girls, boys, and men, we're talking about all women and girls, boys and men, regardless of their sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or sex characteristics. That is a massive step. And it means that that the framework that the European Union is working towards using is one that is LGBTI inclusive. Of course, there are barriers to making that a clear bedrock of everything. The primary one being the treaties, and it being really difficult in this political climate to try to change or increase the language around protected characteristics in the European Union, because we know that there are several members of the European Union that are opposed to adding new characteristics that would potentially take the opportunity to remove protected characteristics if they were given said opportunity. And so the clear commitment from the Commission to that frame of reference is really important. And from that strategy, also then we got the commitment to investigate how best to mirror the Istanbul Convention if the European Court of Justice decides that it's not possible for the European Union to ratify. I think that the ratification question is an interesting one, but it's interesting to me almost only academically for the moment, because nothing is going to happen until the court makes a decision. And so I think it's really valuable and important that while we wait, we are finally doing something else in the form of the fitness check on the existing legislation, looking for where the gaps are and what needs to be done, as well as I think it just closed, or it closes next week, the consultation on a directive on gender-based violence. And also the conversation about whether gender-based violence can be classified as a Eurocrime. All of these are the sort of many pieces of the puzzle that are intended to create the legal framework that mirrors the Istanbul Convention if the European Union can't ratify. And I think that that's absolutely the basic responsibility of the European Union, that it creates the legal framework for that union of equality that we want. And even when there are certain member states that are not in support of equality, that we put legal and legislative practices in place that bring the values of the union to the front. I was recently listening to a conversation about the Eurocrimes piece, and I'd like to reflect on that quickly, and then I'll cede the floor, which is to say, what I observed in this panel was that for something to be a Eurocrime, it needs to have three components. It needs to be a serious crime, it needs to have cross-border implications, and it needs the full approval unanimously from the European Council. Setting aside the conversation about the full approval, quite clearly, gender-based violence has serious consequences, and I don't think that bar is difficult to meet. But the bar that is a bit more complicated legally to meet is the one about cross-border consequences. And the panelists that I was listening to said that the argument has not effectively been made, and I'd like to put forth one potential argument, which is to say that patriarchy, misogyny, sexism, violence against women, gender-based violence generally are systemic issues. And the systemic issues do not see borders. And so the response to a systemic issue that's about our culture as a European Union must be one that is at the level of the Union. We can't deal with systemic injustice, systemic sexism, misogyny on a localized level and expect for that to have anything more than very short-term consequences. So I think the argument needs to be about the way that gender-based violence functions as a cultural manifestation of power and privilege, and not one that is about how individual crimes within that system work. Because frequently the crime is taking place in someone's home, but that crime is influenced by culture, by media, by the economy, and all of those things are where I believe we should be looking for that cross-border component.
Thank you. Well, who better than a member of the European Parliament and the coordinator of this committee to maybe enlighten us a little bit? Do you think that the EU is doing enough? And maybe you would also like to address some of the Kinan's points about Eurocrime.
Yes, and I would like to address so many things. I said in my opening words that I'm so glad that you are here, that you are the true experts, and that I will listen very careful to your insights. And oh my God, you have really filled me. My whole paper is filled with questions and ideas and thoughts. And so the short answer on the question, is the EU doing enough, is no. But a longer answer is, of course, more filled with some steps in the right direction. But I noted very carefully that you said, Kinan, that you were happy to see that in the framework, the Commission are really putting the words in all their diversity. I mean, these are wordings that have been a big fight around. I mean, and I know that you know, but I want everyone to know that we had so many meetings talking about intersectionalism and the importance of talking about all and not just some, and the threat that we also are seeing and feeling. I never thought, I mean, I'm old, I'm 50 years old, and I have been a feminist for all my life, and working with LGBTI rights and so on and so forth, and migrants' rights. And I have truly, and this is almost political, philosophical, but during the last year, I have so many times been sad to hear and feel and see how fellow feminists are talking about the threat when I speak about intersectionalism. Feminists that I thought we were on the same ground, on the same playground, saying that maybe we must be careful when we talk about trans persons and trans people, because maybe it will be a threat to the rights of the women, and so on and so forth. So yes, I agree with what you are saying, that in some ways these texts are positive, and maybe we are moving in some parts in the right direction. But at the same time, what we see in Turkey with Erdogan, and he's not the only one, we have nationalists and right-wing politicians doing the same thing, really narrowing the scope, really talking about and really putting groups in against each other. And if we are stupid and not seeing what you are saying, seeing the patterns, seeing that we are not free until all are free, and so on and so forth, we are really moving in speed in the wrong direction. So is the EU doing enough? Hell no. No, because we need to discuss this. Who are we? I mean, no, I'm serious now. Who are we? What are our values? What are they worth? For whom? Who are we talking about? Tell it in my face then that it's not everyone. Say it straight away. Put it on the table that you are not talking about the migrants. The immigrants, because you are not, right? Tell me that you are not talking about the black lesbian trans woman, because you are not, and so on and so forth. So, well, I am I am sad, but I'm more on fire. But I think that we need to really speak the truth and be really upfront what we are facing right now.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I also amazed with all the panelists. I knew it was going to be a really good panel, but especially that we are all joined on the intersectionality aspect. It makes me full with energy. And I was also surprised that, because I was ready to be angry at the commission, saying that they're only focusing on the cisgender aspect and when they say gender-based violence, but it was refreshing to hear a little bit Kinan's perspective, and then Alice comes and says it was a fight to get them to this point. But maybe Alice, a little bit more, if you can share with us, like what are the roadblocks that we are facing on this directive?
Well, I mean, first of all, we hope that it will be. I mean, now the latest news is that they will present something in the end of the year, and hopefully they will. And hopefully this will be a first real true step towards a legislation. But still we don't know. And still we do know that there are some member states that will not like this and that will fight this. But hopefully I mean, you don't really know in what tools the Commission will use. But since the case is and the situation is moving in the wrong direction in several member states, and we're not only talking about Hungary and Poland, I think there will be trouble when it comes to getting it as a EU crime. Now I'm talking about, and I think this will be a big fight. But this is something that we have been working on very carefully and very closely and hard on in the committees, in the Parliament, in the FAM committee and in the LIBE committee.
Yeah, well, if you want to continue pushing the Commission for the Gender-Based Violence Directive, feel free to join our campaign that is also started with the Green Group in the European Parliament, that we say that there's no more time for no more empty words, and then we're also collecting some signatures to have additional push to have this Gender-Based Violence Directive at the EU level. And now again, to remind the questions from the participants, please comments or questions, feel free to write them in the Facebook or YouTube, wherever you are joining us in this discussion. And maybe now going back a little bit, connecting the work of EU with the non-EU countries and how we can support each other, and also inviting Aslan here. So Aslan, what can we do in Europe, or for me, Turkey is Europe. So what can we do in EU to amplify the message? And also a question that we also received from the audience, maybe first I would like to direct it to you. What are the measures that we can also push for the states to implement the Istanbul Convention? You talked about your United campaign, and maybe you can also address this.
Thank you very much, Özgecan, and thank you very much for the question as well. I mean, maybe I should start with emphasizing that human rights are non-negotiable, and we cannot bargain through human rights. Well, human rights, and also we need to recognize it is not only women's or LGBTI plus, but it's all our rights, together with gender equality and democratic principles, all those values that our institutions, the European Union, our states like Turkey were established upon, or also the Council of Europe, who is responsible for the Istanbul Convention in a way, and they're all at stake, all together, not only one thing from this bigger, big picture. But I should maybe also emphasize that, I mean, when we talk, it is also important to raise the role of Council of Europe, because here with this discussions through Turkey's withdrawal, denunciation procedures and so forth, we have tried to create awareness. Withdrawal from a convention, from a human rights convention, should not be so easy. It can be pseudo at stake. from another country. It can be Lanzarote Convention at stake. So we have to really see and understand our responsibilities through these institutions, from the Council of Europe and European Union all together, and the UN mechanisms. So we need to uphold what we have already established. We cannot go backwards. We can only go forward. So it is also important, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, they have invited the Venice Commission to discuss and to create a report, to write a report on the modalities of ratification and implementation of the Council of Europe conventions. So it is very important. It's because it creates awareness and it creates importance how we should uphold as institutions, as societies, through what we have already achieved. So we cannot leave anyone behind and no one behind, including the mechanisms, conventions that we have created to uphold our rights on the ground. So I think it is important to look from that perspective. And from the EU-Turkey relations too, we have invited, it is not only a lip talk, but it is also through actions how we can legally and politically reverse the decision of Turkey from withdrawal, and we continue to remind all those institutions, state parties, to stand by upholding the Istanbul Convention, not only in Turkey but also in their countries. We will continue to do that, but we should not forget that human rights is not something we can bargain around. So all those refugee deals, all those ongoing trade agreements, bilateral ongoing engagements from all state parties and institutions should happen together with our obligations to uphold our rights and human rights mechanisms in its place, rightful place. But I should also highlight another report we have launched. European Women's Lobby has launched in April, in the middle of April, on the 10th anniversary of Istanbul Convention. It shows how Istanbul Convention is actually, once it is ratified, how it has a positive impact on the ground. So it is important to speak about what Istanbul Convention means. So we have, according to the results of this report, through the experts of the Observatory of the European Women's Lobby, that we have achieved like good laws and implementation on the ground can actually change our society. So 96% of ratified countries have positive developments on policies. 83% has positive developments on protection. 70% been again positive developments on the prevention. And finally, 61% have positive developments on prosecution. So having this legislative framework, even though there are political, cultural, on the ground, many obstacles, having this legal framework is very important, and we should not leave it to national legislation only. We should uphold the universal international mechanism. So we are in this all together. This is not we are in this with our responsibilities through the European Union, Council of Europe, UN. We have to remind them. We have to keep reminding them their responsibilities. So we continue calling European Union, Council of Europe, and all those institutions, UN including, and our member states, the states of the European Union, and I call Turkey as well as we see it because for women's movement and human rights movement, we don't work with we work together. We are in this globally together. So I see Turkey's women's movement and LGBTI human rights movement as a member of the European Union. So we uphold European Union to continue the efforts to ratify Istanbul Convention. All those 6 states who are not ratifying should be forced, should be brought together, and we have to enforce Istanbul Convention and all the directives. The European Union is already in place, but also the directive as mentioned on gender violence is very important. We are reminding within our work at the European Women's Lobby as well that EU directive, we are lobbying for that, we are advocating for that on violence against all forms of violence, including offline and online violence. So there are many aspects of violence through gender-based violence and also on all forms. So we have to remind the states. It is also not only recognizing, but it's also, identifying all the stakeholders should work together to prevent gender-based violence on the ground. So this work creates not only political and legal work, but also in the society, bringing people together rather than leaving anyone behind, because we cannot leave anyone behind.
Thank you, Aslıhan. And further, our audience would like to hear a bit more specific, I think, apart from signing petitions, how else can we help pushing this matter? Maybe I direct this first to Alice. So what can we do?
Well, I think that we should use the toolbox that we have developed in civil society organizations. And this toolbox is the best to change things, because we politicians, no matter which party we come from, we are dependent on trust from the voters. So of course we shall use, petitions, but also, call them out, try to get interviews in newspapers, talk to people, organize. This is always, maybe it's not that sexy the way to do things, but it is the way to change things. So I think that we really need to work through civil society organizations to try to reach politicians and try to really put them on the hot spot, in a hot place where they need to answer the questions that we have and what will happen if we don't get this change going on, or as in Turkey, if they are fulfilling their withdrawal and so on and so forth. I think that is the only way to work. And I also think that we should use the tools that we now have from the EU. I was the rapporteur for the Rights and Values program, and there is a lot of money in that program to use to have this kind of projects, and really apply for this money and use them to raise the awareness and to do more. I think it is crucial.
Thank you. And Kenan, a question again from the audience, which I think really correlates with the work that you do at ILGA, because you represent a big geography that not everyone have the same rights and opportunities to voice their demands, right? So I think you would be fit to answer this question. How can citizens of countries that do support the Istanbul Convention and the EU equality laws help countries like Turkey? What would be the most effective way to lobby our politicians, or maybe to raise our voice and show our support?
That's a great question, and I'd like to sort of make a thread that connects a few of the questions, if I may. Reflecting on what Alice just said about the toolbox that we have as civil society, I think one of the things that's the most important for us to do as citizens is to talk to each other and explain why things matter to us. One of the biggest impediments to effective uptake of human rights and the international human rights framework is that most people don't understand it. We're not taught about the international human rights framework in school. We don't understand how it works. And because of that, it's possible to make arguments such as giving this group of people rights will harm the rights of this other group, which is actually not the way that the system works at all. It's not a pie. I can't steal your piece. But that's an argument that's possible to make when the citizens are kept ignorant about the framework that they live in. So those of us who know about how this works have a responsibility to bring our friends and our family along, because that gap in understanding of how the human rights framework works is what leads us to the divisions among civil society organizations, efforts by some organizations to distance themselves from other human rights issues and say, those are not our issues, really. We're going to focus on this silo, as both Aslıhan and Alice were reflecting on earlier, that we're seeing this happen now in the social justice space in Europe, that some actors are so hyper-focused on their own issues that there's not a real understanding of the consequences of saying you are not us. And so we are not going to work for your protection, and what that will really mean in the long term. Because what that means in the long term is that governments and international actors who do not implement the international human rights framework in an additive and all-inclusive way will get civil society support for focusing only on some small subsets. And that commitment from those of us who are divisive in civil society to say we will support you so long as you cover just us, gives foundation to allow governments to do that more, to divide us more, to undermine the framework more. we have to stand up together, united, and say, this is the way the framework works. And that's a piece where our educating our friends and family and neighbors is really vital. I would say that another thing that EU citizens can do is speak to their European Parliament representatives to push for things like the rule of law mechanism to be inclusive of and reflective of fundamental rights. The rule of law mechanism should address rule of law violations that are about fundamental rights and should apply the same kinds of rule of law sanctions to those violations as it does to others. So you can engage with the European Union and your own representatives about that. Another piece that I would say is really vital is to ask your representatives, ask your government about the role that the EU has in protecting human rights in all of its relationships, in the Eastern Partnership relationships, in the neighboring countries, in the accession process, and to ensure that the EU maintains its activity in the protection of fundamental rights, not only during accession, but after accession, so that joining the EU doesn't mean now you have the human rights defender badge and we're never going to look at you again because you're in the club. We really need to be looking inwards as well as outwards when doing assessments of human rights issues. And I would think that the final thing that I want to say on this is about the piece that Aslihan was pointing out from EWL's research on the impact of implementation of the Istanbul Convention, seeing these massive increases in effectiveness of the legal framework, and at the same time, there's no consequence when it comes to the arguments about family being destroyed. What we see are positive impacts on the lived experience of individuals who are exposed to violence, discrimination, misogyny, sexism, without the society crumbling. We need to document and share that information amongst ourselves to really get at all of the misconceptions and frankly lies that are being promoted about the consequences of this treaty so that we really understand it and can effectively protect it.
Thank you so much.
Something.
Okay, very short. Maybe one last word from you, and then also maybe from Alice, and we are running out of time.
Because I just heard something, and I just wanted to highlight, because we have seen, like in a report from 2018 from the European Parliament itself, even though the convention, even though you become a European member, EU member state, after being a European member state, there are many countries like Austria, Hungary, Poland, Italy, Romania, who have been members, and they have started to back out of gender equality regulation. So being a candidate, these countries have proven to be better, trying to comply with the acquis communautaire, all the legislation. So being a candidate to the European Union is more effective than being a European member state. This is very contradicting. This is a report from 2018. Please check it out. So what I wanted to highlight is all stakeholders, all institutions, including European Union to member states, they are accountable. They're accountable to what they have promised, and we have to highlight that. And also the business sector. Not only the civil society, but business sector. So we are all in this together. So this is what I wanted to highlight once again. And it's not only for women's and LGBTI plus organizations, but all civil society organizations should be hand in hand working on this. So we are united for all.
Yeah. And I would just like to underline the intersectionalism of it, and remember what Aslan said about they being afraid of us. And don't let them think this is like individual cases. I mean, this is systems trying to pressure us down and taking freedoms away from, they start with this one and that one, but they mean that they will take freedoms away of many, many of us. So be aware and organize. Thank you.
That was a really good wrap up, actually. So Alice did the closing and the perfect summarization for my behalf. So thank you also on that, Alice. We were joined with 3 amazing panelists. I learned so much from this discussion. We talked about the Istanbul Convention. I think the things that really stuck in my mind is indeed the intersectional approach that we should take. And also we should not just close our eyes when they start attacking the marginalized groups, but we should all have a discussion all together. and also talking to our community, talking to each other, not being stuck in our silos, and using the toolbox that we are given, and being in discussions with the civil society, with the members of the European Parliament, and also pushing our national countries. So I would like to thank so much for all of our panelists for this very insightful discussion and debate. One more time for our audience, please, signing a petition is still a good step. Please start with signing a petition. Please show your support to Turkey. 1st of July is, I think we will go really hard until 1st of July. So please follow the campaigns United for Istanbul Convention. And yeah, and hope to talk to you soon again with better news, maybe, but after Istanbul Convention. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.